Yo guys, it's Slyroh. You already know that today I'm going to be bringing you a video where I rank all of the bosses from Salt and Sanctuary from my least favorite to my favorite. I just recently finished uploading my first playthrough of this game on YouTube, and I love the game so much that I played it an entire second time on my own time, and I think I've hopefully got enough feel for the bosses to give a somewhat accurate ranking based on my experience of this game. I've seen some other lists that rank the bosses of this game by difficulty, but I just want to talk about my least favorite to my favorite. However, as a bonus, I will put on the screen my ranking of them by difficulty, and I'll even make a list of it at the end if you are interested in that sort of thing, and I'll touch upon the difficulty of each fight as I talk about it, but this list is going to be solely focused on how much fun I have while fighting them and how much I enjoy looking forward to the fight, things like that. My first playthrough was a fully melee character, as well as not really knowing any of the boss patterns and just figuring them out, and my second playthrough was a fully magic character, so hopefully I can give my experience as how it was fighting these bosses as both a melee and a magic character, and I incorporated both of those as well as design, arena, any sort of other factors into this ranking. Let me know your thoughts on my list as well as some of your favorite and least favorite bosses in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be notified of future videos, especially since I will be playing Salt and Sacrifice when that comes out. But let's go ahead and get onto the list. We have 22 bosses to talk about. There are actually 23 bosses in the game, but I'm not counting the Unspeakable Deep, mostly because I haven't beat it in either of my two attempts. I just get wrecked immediately, so I can't really speak to the difficulty or fight itself because I didn't last that long either time. But it is beatable, and if you rank it in your list, that's perfectly fair, but I'm not going to be mentioning it in this list, so we're going to talk about the other 22, starting with my least favorite. Starting off the list is the boss that probably made me rage the most, and that is the Witch of the Lake. This is absolutely one of the hardest bosses in the game, and it is not always a fun challenge. I think most of the attacks are fun, but there is that stupid like red ball attack that shoots the lines at you, which sort of drives you away from the witch, and then she'll do that like crazy attack that will hit you. If you get caught up in it, you basically die, unless you have like some super crazy shield or something. And that's also an attack that she can spam from off screen where you can't even hit her, where, you know, generally the idea is to stick close to her, get right behind her, and, you know, just wail on her, but it's kind of hard to end the fight, like, super quickly, you know. Speaking from somebody who had just, like, a normal, like, melee build, I didn't do anything, like, super overpowered. I'm sure there's ways to, like, overpower it and, like, beat every boss in a couple hits, but I'm not really factoring that in at all. But, yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than there are just a couple of attacks that just seem very unfair. The boss arena is fine, and also the boss run, I'm not really incorporating that in my rankings, but, like, this is actually one of the few, like, good boss runs, which you're gonna need it for how many times it takes to beat this thing. But, yeah, I just didn't leave a positive impression on me, and I just like a lot of the other bosses more in this game. So, yeah, she can be last. Coming in at number 21 is going to be the Mad Alchemist, which I feel like I hear that this boss isn't very hard and is pretty easy to get through, but like that just hasn't been my experience in the two times that I fought him. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with a lot of like the slime thingies that he'll throw, and then the other magic attacks, I find them very difficult to dodge, and it's so easy for like 2 or 3 of them to just be combined together, and it gets more aggressive as the fight goes on. So if you can do a lot of damage and do a lot of damage fast, it is fine. But as a melee character where you have to get up close, it can be a little rough, and it's easy for at least me to get overwhelmed. Maybe in future playthroughs, if I do better like with melee, maybe it's better. But as a magic character, that was also pretty difficult because, I mean, I could stay further away, so it was easier, but it's still pretty easy to get caught up in an attack. So, I don't know. I was not the biggest fan. It just felt like sometimes it was really easy to be overwhelmed, at least for me personally. This might just be me. It might not be super hard for anybody else or anything like that. But, I don't know. I like the idea, but I just didn't like a lot of the attacks, and so I have them pretty low. The next couple that we're going to talk about are starting to fall into more of like the boring tier. Like, they don't really do much for me. So number 20 is that Stench Most Foul. This is a pretty easy boss. Not like the easiest, but it's definitely up there. You know, you just get up close, whack him. He doesn't really have a ton of, like, terrifying attacks. He'll spit out, like, the little dudes, can poison you. It's got, like, that poison breath if you stay too close, but I didn't really find it that difficult, but I don't really find it that memorable. It's basically just, like, a blob of poison, like, gas thing, and it's just, like, I don't know, it's fine, but it doesn't really, it's not really super memorable in my mind. It's pretty easy for both a melee character and a magic character. When I was doing it on my magic playthrough, the health pool, like its HP, actually, it had a little bit more HP than I was expecting. It took a little longer to beat than I was expecting, but it wasn't too bad. But there's really nothing that's super memorable about this, so, eh. Similarly, at number 19 is going to be CARSEJAW the Cruel, which doesn't really do that much for me. It also doesn't help that CARSEJAW isn't even the scariest enemy in the Pitchwoods where he shows up, so that sort of detracts from him a little bit. Once I found out that, like, using a shield, it basically makes this fight a complete walk in the park. I think this is probably the easiest boss for a melee character. It's definitely up there. I actually struggled a little bit, not like struggled, it took me like 2 or 3 times to beat him as a magic character, because he could sort of wind up like a sword hit, and then he would like teleport right on top of you, and I wasn't using a shield, I was just using a staff and spamming magic from across the way. So it still wasn't too bad, but there was definitely a little bit of difficulty as a magic character for me. So that's why I don't find him to be the easiest, but maybe as a melee character he is, and with all the effort that you need to even get to that part of the Pitchwoods, for me anyway, it's just like not really worth it. I haven't even been able to like focus on the design. I like the cool little black sword thing and the sword attack that like comes from out of the ground, like the black shadow thingies. I think it's cool, I think it's neat, but like, I don't know, he's not like super exciting, so I just have him here. At number 18 is going to be the False Jester. I like the way that the False Jester moves. He's kind of funky. I like the way that he kind of jumps and does the sword slash at you. But this is one that I beat first try as a melee character during my first playthrough where I wasn't very good. And I thought he was going to be a lot tougher as a magic character, but no, not really. The health pool is pretty small, and it's not that hard to just dodge the one attack where he jumps at you and then just stay far away and just launch the magic at him. So this is a really easy fight, but I don't mind it. It's fine, and I think some of the attacks are cool, but like, you know, I think from here on out, like, every boss, like, has some good stuff to them, but, like, you know, I think because of the amount that the False Jester is just, like, a pushover, it's not super exciting compared to some of the others that are in this sort of general grouping. At number 17 is going to be the massive lad that is the Bloodless Prince. Design-wise, this thing is, you know, really crazy with just how huge it is. And the boss arena is just this giant stretch of like flat land down in the ziggurat of dust, and it is pretty cool. My main thing is that like it's mostly just a test of endurance because of like how much health this thing has and how long it takes to chip away. As both a melee and magic character, I felt like it took a while to chip him down, and it's not like there's a lot of crazy attacks to try and avoid. I still really struggle with like that belly flop attack. I really could not dodge that. I think I was able to successfully dodge it like once or twice, but I could not do it consistently. So it's sort of just like a DPS test of like how much, like how fast you can do damage versus, you know, not running out of healing stuff versus just like killing him before he hits you with too many belly flops. And all the other attacks are perfectly fine, but you know, he's just big and kind of boring, but like the design and stuff will definitely bring him up. And outside of the belly flop, I don't really have any problems with any of the attacks, so that's what lands him here at the list. At number 16 is going to be the Disemboweled Husk, and I really had a hard time trying to fit this guy onto the list, because conceptually, I think he's so cool. That big, like, fire, like, shotgun, pistol, whatever he is, like, shooting at you is really cool conceptually. I love the fact that he can just, like, bring it up, shoot a whole thing of fire at you. You can try and roll through it, he'll just, like, turn around, shoot at you again. The main problem I have with this fight is when he shoots it up in the air and then, like, the fire sprays down. I still never really figured out what the consistency is to that and how you're supposed to dodge it, because I could never tell where exactly it's coming from. Generally, if I just kind of move around, I could avoid it, or I just take a little bit of damage. And there is a little bit of you having to make sure that you stay close enough to him so that way he doesn't get you with that fire gun. But usually when he would shoot it up, it almost drives you away from him, so we can kind of use that in tandem to get you into some tricky spots where it's basically impossible to dodge. But for the most part, that generally falls on you, but that's probably the only thing that really puts him a little bit lower. This is also by far the worst boss run in the game. I'm not doing an area ranking, but Hager's Cavern is easily my least favorite area of the whole game. That did not change from my first playthrough, even going through it again as a magic character. It's like, it was easier, but like, it was not any more fun. So, thankfully, it didn't take too long to beat him as a magic character. I don't know if that's like the case for everybody. I think I was probably a little bit higher level than I was the first time I fought him, so that might have played a part. But yeah, I put him here. We're getting more closer to the middle of the list where it's just like, you know, there's like one bad thing, but everything else about him is cool. And that's going to be the case for the next few as well. At number 15 is going to be the Untouched Inquisitor. And the Untouched should really refer to you, because when you fight this guy, you really should leave the fight untouched. It's pretty easy to dodge most of the attacks. Even, I'm pretty sure I beat him first try. Even as I was learning, like, what the attacks are, he's just got, like, the chains, and he's, like, flying around, and he'll hit you with them, but, like, it's really not that hard to get some damage. I don't remember him having, like, a huge health pool or anything either, so this is fine. I think the design is cool. I like the swinging, like, chain axe things. The only difficult part of this fight is sometimes those invisible, the invisible enemies, I forget what they're called. They can, Whispermen maybe? They can, enter the fight, and they might already be there, or you can bring them in. I don't super remember, but you know, if you have invisible enemies fighting you, you could probably get caught up in something. That's basically the only reason that I don't say that this is the easiest boss of the game, but it is pretty simple. But I am a big fan of the area of the Dome of the Forgotten. I like the designs of things inside of it, so that is the only thing that's kind of raising the Untouched Inquisitor up. But this is a fairly easy boss fight, and it's probably even easier on repeat playthroughs because it's not really a threat. It's probably a little bit more of a threat because you can go here pretty early on in the game, so if you want a challenge, maybe going here at lower levels might be even more worth it. But I just like the design and the boss arena and the area that it's in general, so that's what lands it here. Number 14 is going to be Murdiella Mao. I struggled so much with this fight. The very first time I fought her, I almost won, and then proceeded to take, like, what, 30 to 45 minutes more trying to beat her. Because she just has some really difficult to dodge attacks. The ones that she can summon, like 5 like magic beams that she'll just kind of keep around her, and she'll shoot like 1 or 2 of them at you sometimes, but then she'll teleport right on top of you and shoot like all of them at you at once, and that sometimes insta-killed me, which was not fun. There is definitely some times where you can get trapped in a corner, but mostly it's on you as the player. I do think that her design in boss arena is like pretty fun. It's pretty cool. I don't really have a problem with it, and I think that she's pretty decently well-balanced for melee and magic characters, in my experience. I just really enjoy the area, and I don't really understand the lore too much, but it is interesting that she is the only boss that doesn't drop salt, because she's not salt-born like everybody else. So I know that there's some pretty cool lore implications as well, even though I'm not like super into the lore. I just find the fight to be fun, but challenging, but there's not too many things that feel, like, unfair, so she's going to land in, like, the middle of the list, because I do think that there's other bosses that nailed the difficulty balance that I like a little bit better, so that's the only reason that she's a little bit lower than she otherwise would be. At number 13 is going to be the Forgotten King, which also incorporates the Forgotten Judge and the Forgotten Knight. But yeah, the boss fight is just called the Forgotten King, and there's 3 of them, and despite the fact that you would think that it would be super easy to get cornered and, like, that it would be super easy to get, like, unlucky, that didn't really happen to me. It happened to me one time when I was playing my magic character, where I did find it a little bit harder to, you know, dodge the 3 different enemies, but I beat it on my second try. This is a little annoying because I think this is also one of the worst boss runs in the game, but thankfully it's not too hard, but there is definitely a chance for you to get sort of hit by, you know, like, get kicked in the face and then, like, get shot by a magic beam, and you can definitely end up in situations where it's a little difficult, but I do think having the 3 of them fight you and having to manage all 3 is fun. None of the health bars are so outrageous, so if you have enough damage, you can get rid of one of them pretty quickly if you can just focus one. I don't really focus one in particular. I do try to get out the magic blasty one, like, as soon as I can, because it's harder to dodge that than it is to dodge the melee ones that come right up on top of you. However, when I did beat this with my magic character, I'm pretty sure the magic blaster one was the one that I saved for last. So, I mean, you can basically do it in any order. It's pretty fun, but I do think that it doesn't have as much personality as some of the ones above this, but I have no problems with this fight. I think it's perfectly fine. So it's going to end up here, you know, towards the middle of the list. At number 12 is going to be the KRAEKAN worm. And I feel like this is probably got to be one of the more higher rated bosses, just because it is a dragon that you fight on top of a castle, which by itself is sick. The only real problem that I have with this boss is the fact that you can get invisible walled pretty hard. The end of the boss arena is not really given any sort of clear indication as to where it stops, so sometimes if the dragon is flying down shooting fire at you from above, you can run into a corner without knowing that you're about to run into a corner. Obviously, with some experience and a couple of attempts, you can sort of learn about how far you can go to get away with it. You can also just position yourself better. You can dodge through the fire to where you don't really get hit by it, or just get hit very slightly. There's so much fire defense stuff available to you at that point of the game. There are definitely ways to deal with it. I found this boss to be easier than I was expecting, but definitely still a challenge. So it is very cool. The design is very sick, and the place that it takes place is really good, but the invisible wall sort of kills it for me. But besides that, this is a very, very good boss, and I think from here on out, I really do just enjoy all the bosses from here on out. Number 11 is going to be the Dried King, which I'm going to assume doesn't have like a super high reputation, because I feel like I hear that this boss is like fairly easy, but and it is, but like I really enjoy the sort of boss patterns. I don't really know what it is about this boss. It has like the fire that will it'll use close to it. It has like the fire beams that you just have to like get in the middle of, and like none of it's hard. And it has like the 3 like fireball thingies that it'll shoot at you, and none of it's hard to dodge, but I just find it fun. And I don't really have any more explanation other than that. I just find this boss fun to fight. So that is what brings it up to 11. I think the design is cool, and I think like the fire is cool. And it can sometimes be a little bit more of a challenge than you expect, just because of how much HP it seems to have. I think it might just be more of its resistances. But like I know in this fight, it's just like, obviously I wasn't going to beat it with like fire, which is like something that I would use a lot for magic. A mixture of like fire and lightning. But the fire was like really not going to help me here. So it definitely is like, it lasts long enough where it's like you still definitely have to position yourself better and like get all the good attacks off. But I just enjoy it. I think it's fun. So yeah. Starting off the top 10 is the first proper boss in the game, which is the SODDEN Knight. I think this boss is cool. Absolutely acts as like the first big challenge on your first playthrough. But this boss is kind of a joke on repeat attempts. Once you know what to do, this boss is actually pretty easy, especially if you are not dying in the area around it and you can go level up a couple times. But even without leveling up, you definitely can get through this. As a magic character especially, the SODDEN Knight is a joke. But being the first real test, I think, is really cool. It's definitely memorable. Beating the first big boss in this game is definitely something to remember, and it's something that, you remember for the rest of your life. So I really like it for that. However, I just think that there are other fights that, do a similar thing, or are just better in other ways. But I absolutely respect this boss, and it definitely deserves being in the top 10. Numbers 9 and 8 actually do very similar things to me, but I will still talk about them one at a time. Number 9 is the KRAEKAN CYCLOPS. It's a pretty earlier game boss, and I think this is another one that, like, it's very intimidating the first time through. I think the first time I ran into it, I was like, oh, there's no way I'm ever gonna beat this. But then a couple attempts later, and I do, because it's actually not as hard as you would expect. As a magic character, this was very easy, but you still gotta be careful because the range on its attacks are pretty crazy. It can jump from pretty far away, and I just really like the design of the Cyclops. I just think it's really, really cool. I like how you get to it and just how it's like at the bottom, and I don't know, like just sort of like where it's at is very, very neat. But it's mostly just its design, its attacks, this giant spiky thing with this like big axe. It's very, very cool. And I enjoy fighting it, especially it helps that it's not like super hard, so I'm not like stuck on it. I don't have any memories of like having to rage quit or being so overly frustrated, but it was nice to conquer because it felt like this should have been like a big scary monster, and especially early on as one of the earlier fights, it definitely helps you feel like accomplished for beating it. So yeah, that's why it's up this high. For similar reasons, at number 8 is going to be the Queen of Smiles. This is another early game boss, and this one is mostly here because I just love its attacks. The sort of like windmill like sword thing where it runs at you and like swings its arms as it's like doing this windmill thing. I love that. The way that it'll like throw a sword at you. I love that. Just everything aesthetically about this boss is so good. It's a lot of fun to fight. It's not that hard. Early game as a magic character, this actually turned out to be a little bit more difficult than I was expecting. When I was a melee character using a shield and stuff, it was pretty easy to block most of the attacks and just learning the timing windows for when you can attack versus when you can't. This is just one of the earlier bosses that really taught me about finding the right timing windows to go in and get hits on the bosses and stuff like that. So I just really like what this boss does, and I just really like it aesthetically, and the area that it's in. Everything about it is just very cool and very good for an early game boss. I would have to look. I think this is probably my favorite of what I would consider like an early game boss. Number 7 is the Coveted, which is, was one of those boss fights that I was not expecting, because there are two like ghostly figures and I'm like trying to attack them, but then I'm not really doing damage, or sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not, until you realize, oh, the axe itself is what you have to hit. And I just think that's really cool. Figuring that out the first time is a lot of fun, and it's a pretty easy boss fight, especially for where it is in the game. It's one of the later game bosses, but it's not that hard. I found it to be a little more challenging than expected as a magic character, just because you have to be able to dodge the shockwaves a little bit better, as well as the magic attacks from far across the way that the one that's not wielding the axe will sometimes throw at you. So I do find this fun. I like where it takes place in the game, and I just like the fact that you have to try and beat up an axe, and sometimes, you know, the axe will get thrown at you and have its things. It's really neat. I like it a lot, so that is why it ends up this high. Number 6 is going to be the Unskinned, which also includes the Architect, the one that throws all the magic things. And I just found this boss fight to be really neat. You have one scary monster that doesn't have any skin that will hit you around. It's not like the attacks do that much damage, but it'll hit you and it'll send you flying, and then the Architect, the magic guy, will just have magic circles like set up all over the place, so you can get pinballed into oblivion and just die. And it's up to you to position yourself properly to not let that happen to you. And I find that a lot of fun. Neither of them have like super insane health bars, so it's easy to sort of take care of one before the other, which I always try to take out the Architect first, because, you know, trying to dodge both the magic and the melee attacks at the same time can be pretty difficult. So I always try to take out the magic one first. I think when I did my magic character, I actually somehow took out the Unskinned first, and then it was just a 1v1 versus the Architect, which was like incredibly easy at that point. But they make a really good team, and it's really cool to sort of figure out how to manage both of them and how to get around it. I think this is a really fun fight, and I enjoy it a lot. At number 5 is going to be Kraken Dragon SKOURZH, or SKOURZH, or SKOURZH. I don't really know how you're supposed to pronounce it, but it doesn't really matter. It's a giant thunder dragon that will sometimes throw these like electric pitchfork attacks. It'll breathe this like electric fire type thing at you, and sometimes it'll just body slam on top of you. So it has a cool mix of attacks. For where it is in the game, I actually don't think it's that hard. It's a lot more menacing than what it actually is, but I find beating up on this thing a lot of fun. Doing this as a magic character is also a lot of fun. This is another one that I was actually starting to become really reliant on lightning around this time, and then I was just like, I assume that Lightning Dragon probably doesn't take a lot from lightning attacks, so I was using a lot more fire, and that was pretty fun. So I just enjoy this fight. I enjoy the design. I enjoy the sort of place where it takes place, because this is like the last boss before you get into like the final boss of the game. This is like your last test, and I don't know, it's just really neat. I like where it takes place. And I just find it fun while not being like overly frustrating or difficult, because at that point of the game, you basically have any tool at your disposal that you want. You can build your character as optimally before this fight, and you can get all of the big tools that will help you do a lot of damage. So this is a lot of fun, and I just think it's really cool. Which leads into number 4, which is the final boss of the game. This is the Nameless God. I really enjoy the aesthetic and the music of the boss arena and just the boss itself. It is so cool, and I love it and respect it on that alone. The fight is difficult, but not impossible, especially as a melee character. I noticed that my damage output was pretty good. It doesn't have like an insane health bar. It just has some really aggressive combos and aggressive attacks. I found the magic attack where he'll like shoot a bunch of magic bullets at you pretty hard to dodge, until I sort of figured out that you can either block some of them, or you can try using the wall to jump over some of them. So there are definitely ways around it. It's kind of interesting because you can't just sit there and like block every attack, because his grab attack will like go through that, and then he can just choke you out. One of the bad things, I had a worse experience fighting him as a magic character. There were 2 times where I got grabbed and shoved into the wall, to where the game actually like I got stuck into the wall. That happened 2 times in a row. So that was really, really annoying, and also because he's like resistant to like everything. Being a magic character is just like a lot harder, and again, like I wasn't really using a shield to try and like block any of the attacks, so it's like I just have to like dodge, and his attacks are hard to dodge, so that's why I have him as like the hardest boss in the game. Because as a magic character, I just find this fight basically impossible. It is so difficult. and it's not easy as a melee character for me either. Maybe if you do like a lot of multiple playthroughs and you're more optimally built, maybe it's not that bad, but for me this one is crazy. But I absolutely respect it as the final boss of the game, and I think it's a lot of fun, but there are a couple that I just like a little bit more. Number 3 is RONIN CRAN, and yes, it's because he front flips at you with a sword. That's the only reason. The cool factor is off the charts. This isn't like an insanely hard boss fight, but it's definitely not easy. He's got some aggressive attacks that will definitely do a lot of damage depending on when you decide to take him on. He is, you know, just cool. I like where the fight takes place and the attacks that he has at you. But absolutely, sitting there watching him like power up just to then do this like front flip assault at you. I mean, right there, I was like, that has to be top 3. Absolutely. And there's a case for it to be like up there as the favorite, but outside of that attack, there's not much else that is like that's like super memorable. And, you know, it has a couple of other attacks, you know, where it like swings the sword and along the ground and does some other things, but it's pretty aggressive, but it's not too hard, especially once you figure out like what he can do and then what you can do back and finding your windows of opportunity to attack. But it's just so cool, and the cool factor is just off the charts. So that is what lands RONIN CRAN here at number 3. Number 2 is going to be the third lamb, and I think this might be an unpopular opinion because I feel like I've only heard complaints about this boss, but I have so much fun fighting this boss. I love, love, love the design. This like bird, scorpion, everything except lamb as an animal attached to it is so cool. The electric shocks that you have to try and dodge are difficult, but like not impossible. I definitely had a better time fighting it as a melee character because then you can stick up close, but even then you have to be wary of it knocking you away with its tail, and just trying to find the dodge timing is difficult. This is a fight that I think is really difficult, but it always seems fair to me, and it's always just a lot of fun. And I did have plenty of fun fighting it as both melee and magic. I think it holds up. I love the design. Again, this is another boss from the Dome of the Forgotten, which is probably my favorite area in the game, and I just really, really like it a lot. I think this is another one that has some pretty interesting like lore implications as well as for like its existence, but like I don't super know it that well, so I'm not an expert of that by any means. But I just really, really like this boss, and I definitely look forward to fighting it every time because I feel like it's such a challenge, and it's something that I have to prepare myself. I need to make sure that I'm going into this fight very well prepared with either a good weapon or higher tier like magic or whatever, because it is absolutely going to be a test to see if you can win, but it's just so much fun. So that is what brings it to number 2. Which brings me to my favorite boss in the game, which is the Tree of Men. And the amount of times that I raged at this when I first encountered it, I'm very surprised that it ended up this high. But the design alone, it is literally a tree with a bunch of men just hanging off of it. And you have to, you know, hit all the men and destroy all them. And then, you know, that brings it to the next phase where you attack the top. And then there's a final phase where it like breathes a lot of fire. And just the sort of balancing act that you have to do between the left and right sides as well as the platforms. If you stay on the ground, the shockwave will knock you off. There are ways to like deal with that and dodge it and sort of cheese it, but I don't do any of that. I absolutely try and just balance on either the left or right side, but you can't stay on like the bottom, which is generally the safer spot because, you know, all the platforms will kind of go away. There's no like great spot to stay except for I think like the left side on like the very top. There's like a safe place to go there, and you can use that. But even then when you get to the final phase, he's gonna like breathe fire, so you have to like drop the whole way down, get over to the other side so you can be safe, and then like hit him. I found this to be so much fun, very challenging. But once you sort of figure it out, it's good. But it's challenging in a different way where it's not always about the attacks. It's just about the different environmental effects that you need to deal with. There is like one of the attacks that I find hard to dodge, where he shoots like a couple different like beams of like light at you. They're not like usually deadly too much, but they can definitely hit you. And then if you combine that with getting hit by one of the things that the men on the tree are like throwing at you, you can definitely end up getting a little screwed over. But the design alone, the boss arena, the entire arena is built around trying to fight this boss. Like, this is a boss that does not work in any other sort of arena. It is specifically made for this one, and I just think it's so, so cool. This is easily my favorite boss in the game. So, yeah. Well, there you go. There we have it. That was my list of my least favorite to favorite bosses in Salt and Sanctuary. Let me know what some of your favorites and least favorites are. Let me know your opinions on my opinions. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe so that way you can be notified when more videos come up. especially once Salt and Sacrifice comes out. But that's all I got for you, so if you enjoyed, let me know, and I will see y'all around. Till then, peace out.